What is going on, YouTube people? Neo Cards and Comics here. Today we got a special one. Interview. Long form. Buckle up, get a cup of coffee, grab a donut, get whatever you need, sit back, relax. Today I had the pleasure of talking with Elizabeth Gruene, General Manager of Pop Culture at PSA. She is over a bunch of different categories, and the one that was, of course, of most interest to me is comic books fall under her division, as she is one of the people with her team leading the way on this program. So I had a chance to sit down and talk with her for about an hour. We covered a wide range of topics, the rise of pop culture, TCG, and then a lot of comic book talk in the middle / back half of the chat. So sit back, relax, buckle in. This thing runs for, like I said, about an hour. Take it in chunks. Do whatever you need to do. But it is a great conversation. And once again, thank you and shout out to Elizabeth from PSA for taking some time out of her busy day to sit down and have a little chat with all of us, giving us a behind the scenes look of kind of what it looks like to launch into a new category. So with that, let's go ahead and transition on over to the interview. All right, boys and girls, I am pleased to have Elizabeth Gruene, General Manager of Pop Culture from PSA, probably one of the best titles I have ever heard for someone at a company. Welcome to the show, Elizabeth, and thanks for carving out some time for me.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm excited to be here, chat a little bit about what we have going on in the pop culture world at PSA.
So, for people that don't know, what categories actually fall under you? Because people think of PSA, the first thing they hop to is sports cards for sure.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And that's, kind of historically been the biggest part of our business, but definitely in recent years, we've seen a huge surge in popularity with TCG cards and non-sports cards. So that's the biggest kind of chunk of what my overall kind of management is. And it's been really exciting to see those categories continue to grow and helping PSA kind of support growth in the TCG space and the non-sports space. So that's kind of what I started out focusing on the most. But then also we have some newer, kind of more emerging categories that fall under our pop culture umbrella. So Funko Pop grading, we're the only ones who really offer that today. And then video game grading through our brand Wada. So that's been really cool to see that business kind of evolve and grow. And then lastly, comics, which we just announced. That's kind of our latest venture in the pop culture umbrella, and I think really rounds out our offering across the pop culture space. So that's my world.
And comics we'll definitely dig into a little bit more, but I kind of, TCG, it's crazy when I look at the gem rate numbers every month that he tracks. It's insane the amount of TCG that kind of comes through your guys' door. Do you have like a soft competition with the sports guys of like, we're catching up to you, or maybe we've caught you in certain, I mean, some months I think you guys are ahead of them on the TCG side. It's insane how much that amounts for your guys' total monthly business.
Yeah, no, it's huge. And I think at this point, Pokemon is our single largest card category that we get submitted. So if you look at like a single sports like basketball cards or football cards, and then if you look at just Pokemon, like Pokemon alone would be the largest. And so total TCG is still a little bit smaller than total sports altogether, but we're inching more and more towards 50-50. And so it's been cool to see that growth because even again a few years ago that was like such a small portion of our business, and it's something that's really seen exponential growth in the last few years. And it's something we can't ignore, and we've built even more expertise in, and are really focused on continuing to grow because there's a huge TCG card collecting audience out there, and getting them to grade with PSA is obviously a big priority.
It probably has to be interesting too to see, because like new TCGs come to market kind of more than new sports cards do. Like, and I know yourself, you're a big Lorcana collector, correct?
Yes, yes, I am. I like just went to D23 and got the Mickey Mouse
Oh,
promo card from this year. I was like, a big agenda item for me there. I'm a huge Lorcana fan, and I play it too, which has been really fun. But yeah, that just celebrated its like 1 year anniversary, and already like that's making some good traction. I think it's around like 4 to 5% of our TCG submissions now are Lorcana, and going from zero to that has been really cool to see. And I think it has a ton of upside with Disney and like the fan base out there, and like they're just getting started and starting more of like their official competitive scene, and more and more people are starting to play it. So it's been cool to see the growth there as someone who's like very personally invested in it too.
I saw people going crazy for those D23 boxes on social.
Yes, yeah, the like Ravensburger booth at D23 was mobbed, and like that was just so cool to see that like within the total kind of portfolio of Disney booths and everything that was at D23, like that booth was popping off the whole time, and like they had to like shut down, like they had crazy lines, like there was so much hype around Lorcana, so that made me really happy to see like kind of the Disney community like embrace it. And I feel like there's still so much more they can do in terms of like getting Lorcana in the parks and introducing even more of like that broader Disney community to the game. And yeah, I think it'll be cool to see kind of what they continue to do.
Now, does non-sports fall under you? So, like, if I submit a Marvel card, like, does that go under not like, does that fall under the pop culture category? Because it's not a TCG, but it's
Yeah, it does. It
okay.
does, yeah, fall into it. And so that's another thing we've been like focused on is I think maybe at times we were just doing like, this is a special just for TCG, and like trying to broaden that to like TCG and non-sports, and making sure that that non-sports community is feeling the love too. And I think there is going to be a lot of crossover too, like with Marvel, like card collectors with comic book collectors. And so definitely that's all kind of part of this same pop culture umbrella.
Now, and primarily, kind of the reason we wanted to talk today was mostly about comic books. And since you're kind of in that pop culture category, and that's kind of you've been sprouting off in the, like you mentioned earlier, Funko Pops and now comics.
Mm-hmm.
What is, and we can kind of couch this in the vein of comics, like what's the process like when you guys sit down and say, okay, we're not in this category yet, or like what categories are we not in? Like what does that even look like from a macro level of like, okay, how do we want to go into this category, what's our steps, like that sort of stuff, like what, basically walk us kind of down that path a little bit of the decision making on getting into comics, should we, shouldn't we, and kind of how that ball got rolling.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, PSA has been around for 30 years, and it's like, I think a lot of people are surprised, like, why haven't they gotten into comics sooner? Like, it's such a big collecting category that we haven't touched. And I think, um, yeah, it's not like it was something that hadn't been discussed before. I think over the several decades, it's just the right timing and kind of the right, I guess, person to like actually bring it across the finish line. Like it is a lot of work bringing these new categories to life. And like to your point, like it's a big investment. Like we have to make sure it makes sense. And I think just the last couple years with the growth we've seen across pop culture, and that being kind of a new initiative of like how do we expand out of just sports cards and coins and these amazing businesses that have gotten to us where we are today, but like what's that next layer of growth and what's the future opportunity. And I'm like super happy to be part of that and kind of more of these like new emerging growth areas for PSA. And so I started really like scoping this out a couple years ago and just looking at the market, and looking at the landscape and doing a lot of like analysis, working very closely with like our corporate development team and our strategy team, working with our finance team, trying to put together like a business case, of okay, how much market share could we get? How many comic collectors are there globally? Like how many of those could we get? Looking at magazines, like okay, how much of our current customer base maybe already collects these things, and could they come over, like the sports card collectors, maybe they want to collect sports magazines or already do, and how big is that market on top of comics, and just like doing a lot of analysis on kind of how can we position ourselves, and what do we think kind of the total size of the pie is. And I think one thing too that has been really important is it's not just going out there and like taking share from the existing comic book and magazine collecting community. It's like, how can we increase the size of the total pie? And I think I hit on really briefly like international. Like, I feel like there's a lot we're doing as a company to go into new markets. Like, we have our office in Japan now. We're building submission centers globally, and like there's so much untapped kind of like inventory out there in the world that isn't probably getting graded today. So I think there's like that way we can grow. I think magazines as a whole, like we have our PSA magazine. There's so many different types of magazines. There's Disney magazines. Like, how can we just increase the overall comic and magazine collecting business? Because I think that will be like good ultimately for the whole community and for everyone. And I'm really excited to kind of see what we can do there and just like growing it overall, not just taking share. I think it'll be interesting to see kind of how it plays out and like where we see initial success and like what types of books we see come in and what eras, and who kind of is excited to start submitting with PSA. We'll see. Time will tell. But yeah, get back to your question. It was a lot of analysis and like careful thinking, and this has been something I've been working on for about 2 years now. So it's not like something we're going into willy nilly. It's taken a lot of thought and strategy, and we want to do it right, and that's why we've taken our time. It's, we waited 30 years, so it's like let's do it well and not just rush into it. And luckily, I have a great team around me too, and have hired some amazing experts, and have great relationships with people in the community and dealers and influencers, and trying to like really understand and like build something too that people want, and like address pain points that maybe exist today, and like, yeah, ultimately do something that's really good for the hobby and good for the community.
Yeah, I know. I remember. I think I started talking to you guys about it in like around Christmas, first of the year, in one of the first meetings we had. I remember when you were showing me stuff. I'm like, wow, they're way farther along than what I thought they were. Like when you
Yes.
initially were like, we would like to talk to you about some comic book stuff. And then at the very first Zoom, you guys were showing me stuff, and I'm like, oh, this is way further along than I thought. I kind of anticipated with where
Yeah.
you guys were going to be at. So I could tell that you had already put a lot of time into it, and that was 7-8 months ago, if not even further. So
Yes.
interesting to kind of see what I saw then versus kind of what's actually come to fruition.
It
One thing I
definitely
kind of wanted
takes
to
a
circle
lot of
back to.
time.
Oh, go ahead.
Like, oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, these things take a lot of time. Like, even just like developing like the holder, it's like we've gotten through multiple iterations of that, and it's months and months, of lead times to build molds and to get 3D prints and to like everything we're trying to do at PSA standards, you know what I mean? And with PSA quality, and um, the PSA brand is so strong that we want to protect that. And like, if we're going to do something, we want to do it really well. It's not like we're a no name entrant and we can kind of fumble our way, into this. Like, we want to get it right. And so that's where too, I think there's like a lot of work to make sure we're putting our best foot forward and not just kind of winging it. So yeah, there's been a lot of like iteration, and yeah, you saw like prototypes of holders. I feel like a year ago. So it's something we're continuing to like iterate on and work on before we go public.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to circle back to really quickly, you mentioned magazines. This is kind of a sidetrack, but the reason I thought of it is because I got my pop culture magazine in the mail today, and I got the
Nice.
Wolverine cover. I don't remember if that's the rare one or not.
No,
Um,
it's not.
darn it.
Sorry.
Has the PSA magazine kind of taken on a weird life of its own? I know you guys did the One Piece one, and that one went crazy.
It was
I think
great.
the promo card by itself goes for a couple $100.
Oh
And
yeah,
even,
I have one of the promo cards right here. I have a magazine somewhere too. But yeah, the
I think mine's buried somewhere on my desk, and I actually have the promo card sitting ready to send in the PSA.
oh
Um,
yeah, I literally am about to submit mine to PSA too. But yeah, this was the One Piece PSA magazine, and this was the promo cards kind of glaring in the card saver. That, yeah, it was exclusive to the PSA magazine. You could only get it if you were a Collectors Club member who subscribes to the Pop Culture magazine. So we saw so many people sign up
I
for Collectors
switched.
Club. Yeah, or
I don't
switch, yeah.
Yeah.
But we had a lot of like new subscribers and new, Collectors Club members, which is amazing. And so it was a great way to bring new people in. And I think too, like I was saying, Pokemon has like historically been large majority of our total TCG volume, but One Piece has been growing like crazy. And I think the magazine was a great way to like introduce a lot of people to One Piece who maybe they're like Pokemon players or collectors or Yu-Gi-Oh or other TCGs that have been around longer. But I think this was a big win for like getting people into One Piece who maybe haven't ever collected One Piece before. And these cards are super valuable. We've seen a lot of them come into our grading room since distributing them through the magazine, so it's been really cool.
Did you guys ever think internally that the magazine would be like this collectible? Like, I know you guys do the numbered ones and the variant prints and stuff like that. But some of those resell for quite, like the variants in the numbered magazines sell for some of them a decent chunk of cash. Like,
Oh
they
yeah,
have actually become very collectible.
yeah. Like we had the Lorcana kind of Disney cover, and like obviously this one was near and dear to my heart, but there was one that was like the gold sparkle out of 500. We always show the variants on the last page, which is kind of cool, but that one was selling for like over $1,000 on eBay and stuff. And so,
It's easy.
and it's funny because we see people grade the PSA magazines with CGC today or with CBCS. Like some people do get PSA magazines graded. So, I mean, it's not going to be like huge volume by any means, but
Yeah.
it is kind of cool that like we have a magazine that we distribute every month and they are collectible. So I expect people will grade them. I'm definitely going to grade mine. So yeah, it is kind of cool how like I was this year as we launched the pop culture magazine. So it's a new thing. The sports magazine is amazing too, but it's been fun to have something dedicated to the pop culture space where we can really highlight those categories and those collections and those stories and um, kind of make something that's maybe more fun for like that community because we don't see a ton of crossover between like the TCG collecting community and the sports card collecting community. So now it's like they get content curated to their interests, which I think makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I can't wait for the day. Maybe you guys could do like the golden ticket every month where one person gets like the PSA 9/8 mailed to them of whatever the collector cover is, or
Yeah,
the PSA special of send in your PSA magazine for a discounted rate of whatever your guys's,
that's a great
future
idea.
rates will be.
I love that idea. No, it'll be cool. Definitely, as we've been working on our magazine holder, it's been like it has to fit the PSA magazine. Like that's non-negotiable. So yeah, it'll be cool. I think magazines is going to be a really fun category for us, just because again there is our magazine, but then also like with Sports Illustrated, like it's pretty much like a giant card. You know what I mean? And so I think a
Yeah.
lot of people who grade their sports cards with us, like will grade Sports Illustrated magazines with us, and I think that market has a lot of upside.
Well, you even see it too, like with a lot of like Slam magazine or a lot of music magazines, like first Taylor Swift covers, like that sort of stuff is very popular in collectibles, or
Yeah,
political magazines, or old school new, like old issues of Time with like classic covers of very newsworthy events you
totally.
see collected. So I do think magazines are going to be an interesting category for you guys. Kind of what you were getting into there, specifically with like Sports Illustrated, like that just seems like an absolute no brainer.
Right.
I want my LeBron collection and I want his first Sports Illustrated issue matching holders with my LeBron cards that I have, or the little display that I have in a cabinet, or whatever the case might be. Or same thing on the pop culture side. If
Yeah.
you have all your One Piece cards or all your Pokemon cards or Lorcana cards, you want that magazine in the holder that matches what all your cards are in.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think too, magazines and comics are great vehicles for autographs, and so um, I expect that will be another area where we can succeed because we have proven ourselves in the autograph authentication and grading space for so long. And so now taking that and applying it to the comic and magazine space, I think will be really exciting. Like I know people have, yeah, like a LeBron first cover with his autograph on it, like I feel like that would be like an amazing collectible for someone who's a huge LeBron fan. And so I think the autograph piece like is kind of the next level too that we can offer.
You mentioned it on the magazine thing. I got to imagine it's a little bit tricky on the holder because like comic books is one thing. Those are for the most part fairly uniform. Some older stuff is a little bit larger size and there's some double size issues and that. But like magazines, you have a Rolling Stone magazine, that's a whole different beast than like a Sports Illustrated. That's got to be tricky to design some sort of baseline holder that either have multiple versions of it for different sizes or one that can kind of adapt to different sizes. Like what's the thought process in going into stuff like that? Is it like, do we make one thing with like an insert, or do we want something that's like actually multiple different sizes? Because some of those magazines can vary quite a bit.
Yeah. No, and I mean, we're not going to have like Life magazine that's like huge.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to have definitely limits. And so that's why we're saying, kind of standard sized magazines for right now. But we will have one kind of exterior holder and then different interior wells or kind of inserts that will make sure it fits snugly based on that variability in dimension. So yeah, there will be kind of an inner piece that can change based on the exact dimensions of that item. But the actual magazine holder itself is pretty big because we do want to have that tolerance where we can, ideally grade as many different types of magazines as we can, but there's got to be like a limit for some of those really big ones, and the thickness too can get a little out of control. So it's not gonna be everything, but I think the key magazines will have covered for sure.
Now, when you guys go into a new space like this, or I'm sorry, a new space for you, but an existing space.
Mm-hmm.
So like, comics has a very established, I don't want to say, I won't use rules, but like guidelines. Like people are used to a grading scale that exists a certain way. People are used to, the way things are labeled certain ways. How much of that lead up process is, do we want to go with the flow on certain things, or do we want to shake things up and say, we'll use grading scale for an example. Well, no, this is PSA's grading scale. We use, what you guys traditionally use in cards. It's an 8.5, it's a 9, and then it jumps to a 10. Do you look at that and say, is this something that we can, shake the snow globe on, or do we need to fit in to, not shake the boat too much? Because you want collectors, that are used to 30, however many years, I forget how long CGC's been grading or how long the comic books have been getting graded, 20, 30 years of history, to not shake that up and just kind of say, okay, like this, you guys have your baseline already and we're going to kind of adapt to you. Like, what's that decision-making process have to be like?
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard. And I think there's definitely been a lot of thoughtful discussions and debate internally on kind of, yeah, where do we want to be the maverick and do things totally different and shake it up versus where do we want to kind of, accept that this is the industry standard and we kind of need to fall in line if we want people to adopt our service. It is really different than like Funko Pops, where we were the first entrant into grading, so we could kind of set the standard and there was no existing competitor, and so we could do whatever we wanted essentially and still can operate that way. And yeah, comics is really like, I feel like the first time where we're entering into a space where there's like such a big history and an established way of doing things, and we don't want to be too disruptive because then that will just like alienate people and they'll be like, this is stupid, like they won't even give us a shot. And I think a lot of it too is honestly like me and others talking to like collectors and dealers and influencers and comic book shops and people who have been in this industry for a long time, and asking them like, what do you want to see from us? Like, what's important to stay the same? What's something that you don't like about the current way things are done that maybe you would want us to shake things up? Like, I think that's been the most helpful thing for me, and kind of my North Star is like putting the customers first and trying to do what's right for the community. And like, I don't have all the answers. I don't think it should just be me deciding. Do you know what I mean? And so that's where I've like really leaned on the relationships I've built and like have been very genuine and like wanting to understand like what they want to see from PSA. And every time there's like something on social media or a YouTube video or people talking about this, I'm like diving so deep into that and like trying to get all that information, because that's like gold for me, is to really hear out what people want. And I know that, yeah, there are things that aren't perfect with the other options out there, and a lot of people are like, this is great timing, like I'm looking for XYZ, and like PSA can, if you can fix these things, you have my business. And so um, I think there's a lot of room where we can come in and yeah, pick our battles of like, what are we going to do the same versus different. I think grading scale is one where that's probably like been the most contentious, honestly, where I see pros and cons to both. Like the PSA 10-point grading scale is like so iconic, and I think there's a lot of benefit to keeping it simple. But in talking with experts and people in the industry, they're just like, comic books are so much more complex than a card. Like it's such a different type of collectible, and like you have, you know, staples in your pages and the cover, and like there's just so many things going on that it's really hard to simplify it down to our card grading scale. And that this kind of decimal point system will allow for a lot more accuracy. Also, there just could be that complexity of like, if someone has their books and they want to cross them over, it's like, is it going to get a 9 or is it going to get a 10 or even a 9.5? But it's like, it gets a lot harder to bring new people over who maybe have their whole collection already graded with someone else, if we don't kind of mirror that same grading scale. So there were a lot of reasons, but all in all, we've decided that with the grading scale, that's somewhere where we aren't going to rock the boat and be mavericks. Like we're going to kind of keep the industry standard just because it has been around for so long and it's that way for a reason. And I think that's one area where we're kind of going away from the traditional PSA way, which is interesting. So I think the thing that is potentially different is like maybe other grading companies are a little bit gun shy of like giving a 10 because they haven't for so long. And so that's like scary to give a 10. Whereas I think for us being new, like, you know, these books don't exist yet. Like we can kind of be more free, I think, to say like, this looks like a 10 and meets the criteria to be a 10. Like we can give it a 10 and not have that fear of like always kind of wanting to bump things down to a 9.8 or like, you know, now you're starting to see maybe are more 9.9s coming and people are like concerned about that. Like, I think we can kind of come in with a blank slate and be like, let's call a 10 a 10. And so I think that could be something that could excite collectors, is like, where if it deserves a 10, we'll give it a 10. And the PSA 10 is so iconic, and I want to be able to give PSA 10s in comics. Like we're not going to be like 9.8 is the max. Like if we have a 10 in our grading scale, we should use it.
Yeah, that's a very hot button issue on the comic book side of the world for sure right now. And you know, it would be tricky, you know, if you have a census with, you know, a ton of books at a certain grade, and then you want, maybe internally you even want to like shift things and say like, you know, we probably should be looking at these a little bit closer. We probably, some of these books are probably legitimately 10s that have gotten 9.8s or 9.9s.
Right.
It's hard to put that water back into the water bottle. Like it's once it's spilled, like once that die has been cast, it's tricky to try to fix that on the fly because it has a lot of downstream repercussions. Whereas
Totally.
you guys starting from scratch, you know, you don't have anything yet. Like you're literally starting from square one, so you get to kind of set out from the beginning and say, this book is what a 10 looks like with us, this is what a 9.9 looks like with us, this is what a 9.8 looks like with us, and so on and so forth down the line.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like definitely like consistency and accuracy, and like we're doing a ton right now in terms of just like documenting everything in our standards and like what exactly does that mean to be a 10 versus a 9.9 versus a 9.8, and kind of, yeah, assembling this team of experts to like be very, very specific about that, so that because I mean, that's going to be how we either make it or break it. You know what I mean? In this industry is like how we do our grading. And we've done a very good job in our other categories, I think, of being very trusted and consistent. And like, I want to obviously apply that same PSA standard to how we do comics and magazines and do things right. And so yeah, we're doing a lot of work on that right now.
That's got to be kind of exciting for you and the team, I'm sure, like being able to kind of lay out from the ground up, like what does our standards and practices look like in regards to a grading scale, and just like all the other components that go around it. And you probably got to kind of experience something similar to that with Funko because you guys started that from the ground up as well.
Yeah,
But that's got to be an interesting. There's probably a lot of interesting meetings about laying that all out, and a ton of work that has to go into, like, this is how X, Y, and Z thing are going to work, or this is what we're going to look at for this, that, or the other thing.
totally. And I think too, like looking at maybe the way it's done at other places of like, oh, if this one page is missing, then that means it's docked X points, and like why is that, and like how much should we be weighing like the cover appeal versus the interior pages, and like actually like grappling with these things and like thinking about the grading standards and why they are the way they are, like in kind of the industry standard and how different people apply it, and figuring out what's right for us and what makes sense. And definitely that will be something that we'll be publishing, and we're not fully done, but I think we want to be transparent and clear about like how we're going to be applying our standard and what that looks like.
So you guys obviously announced that San Diego Comic-Con, I don't know, was that about a month ago? Has it been a month?
Yeah,
I don't know, a few
I think
weeks.
I think that was like a month ago. I'm like, my brain is mush. I don't even know. It's been a
I'm
blur.
sure it's been a whirlwind since then. And then your plan launches sometime in 2025. We'll touch on that a little bit. But is a lot of that, coming out party to actual go live, is a lot of that just like laying out those things, like to give your guys time to kind of lay that stuff out and make sure you have the groundwork in place. And then also, I'm sure, you could probably only hire so many people in secret that you guys are getting in the comics before it's actually out there in the wild. I'm sure a lot of this time is also, hey, we're doing this, by the way, if you're in the industry and would like to come work for us. You kind of have a little bit of a ramp up process to recruit as well in the open. Like I
Yeah,
said, I know you guys have made some hires behind the scenes, but that's got to be a little bit tricky when you're trying to keep under wraps fairly large news that you guys are entering into a new market. That alone has got to be a little bit crazy. Did you have, I just kind of thought of this on the fly, like from the time that you guys kind of started really kind of like sneaking around a little bit more behind the scenes at the end of last year up until San Diego Comic-Con, like were you concerned like word was going to get out prior to like the official announcement? Did that ever float in the back of your head of like, oh god, I'm going to open up Instagram tomorrow and there's someone talking about like, I have it confirmed that PSA is entering the comic book space a month before you guys officially do?
yeah. I mean, definitely it was like a little bit of a concern, but I think we did a good job keeping it under wraps, like, and not having a lot of official statements or anything like that, and not yeah, not having anything confirmed ahead of the time we got to announce it. But I definitely feel like people were talking about it before we officially announced. Like I think a lot of people knew it's a small world, people talk. And so I think a lot of people suspected or kind of had heard rumblings of like, oh, I think this is happening, but nothing had been like publicly confirmed by PSA. But I think now that like we've officially said like, yes, we're doing this, like it's been such a relief to just like have it out in the open, and now it doesn't have to be as secretive or something. Because I mean, the truth was we were really just investigating and trying to like scope it out, and it wasn't like 100% locked in by any means, and it takes a lot of resourcing and energy and investment to get something like this off the ground. And so it's something that we wanted to do our due diligence and like be sure about. And so now it's like, okay, things are happening, like we're definitely doing it and we're out in the public, and definitely that's been nice. And yes, can have a lot more open conversations now, and it's been exciting to see just like the reception. I feel like overall, I feel like things have been really positive. I feel like super welcomed by the comic and magazine communities. And I think people are excited to have competition. They think competition's good. They're excited to see PSA enter and kind of see what we can do, and how we can innovate in these categories. So yeah, it's been nice to be able to be out in public about it now. And the other thing that is a huge benefit, like with announcing early, like we did at San Diego is that we got real feedback. Like we had our holders there in person. People could feel them and touch them and look at them. People could see our labels. Like, and so that was so valuable because we got such good feedback, and like we could kind of do like this early test almost of like, okay, like what do you guys think? Like, is this something you'd be excited about? Would you submit to PSA? We did like a survey at our booth at San Diego Comic-Con, so got tons of feedback. Obviously talked anecdotally to a lot of people. And so now we can actually like take all that feedback and put it into place. You know, like our holders are still in development, our labels are still in development, like things can change. And that's what I was telling people. I'm like, I want to hear, because this isn't like the final product. Like we have time to iterate and respond to the community. So that was a huge benefit of kind of announcing early and then like getting a bunch of really good feedback.
Yeah, announcing at San Diego Comic Con and having the Kith collab was awesome.
It was crazy.
I'm not by any means like a culture shoe guy person at all. And I definitely had FOMO over the Spider-Man Venom box and I think the Magneto box. The presentation that they do on their stuff is top notch. I was fortunate enough to get the previous year when you guys did the collab with them with the engraved card. I got one of those boxes and that was like just they crush it with presentation and like you could just tell everything is very well thought out.
Yes, it's
Your
such
booth
a
looked
great brand.
crazy.
Oh, I'm so glad you, yeah, it was crazy. It was mobbed. Like we were shut down multiple times. I know it was frustrating to some people. We were like trying to work very closely with the San Diego Comic Con team and like tell them like, hey, this is going to be crazy. Like we need more space. And we did what we could with the constraints we had, but it was wild. And so hopefully we'll get to do something again like that next year and have a bigger booth and more space for a line and lottery system. There were a lot of good learnings from that. It wasn't perfect by any means, but I think it was just so cool to see like the hype that drove, and looking at those secondary sales too. Like, you know, some people are selling like the sealed boxes with the shoes and the comic, but even the comics alone, like there was one that sold on eBay for like $860, just the
They've
comic.
a couple of the Venom cover ones have gone well over 1,000.
Yeah.
I may or may not have a safe search because I kind of want one.
Well, and that's, yeah, I haven't seen any sales for like the one of one sketch covers or anything like that, but
I
like,
don't know that I've even seen any of those in the
yeah, I'm like,
wild yet.
who's
Might still
getting
be in
those?
the mailbox
Well,
somewhere.
yeah, they were distributed like globally, so they're at like Kith stores in Korea and Japan and Canada, like, so really these could pop up anywhere. But yeah, that collaboration was so fun, and honestly, that was too part of kind of the reasoning around the announcement timing was we'd done the Kith partnership last year with cards, and then we were talking about like, okay, like what could we do for San Diego this year? And they had talked about comics, and we're like, oh, like I don't know if you guys do this, like. I was like, actually, like this
Well,
could work
actually,
out really well. Like we're timing could work, and so it kind of was like this perfect thing where it was like right around the time when we would have holder prototypes and like we could announce, and like it was a huge show, a great way to make a marketing splash, like by partnering with them and Marvel, like so it all really came together perfectly, and I'm super happy with that as our way to kind of enter the space.
well, and for you, it had to be, you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, the ability to like, you've been like, this has been your baby this whole entire time. And then all of a sudden you get to throw it out in the wild and you're just like immediately getting probably feedback overload to a degree because you have, show attendees, collectors, like at San Diego Comic Con, like everyone is at that show from just your common, comic book collector all the way up to super collectors, dealers, like everyone is in that room to be able to kind of gather all that instant feedback all at once on here's like thoughts on the case, the label, how heavy it is, what it feels
Mhm.
like in hand, security, like all that stuff was probably invaluable for you guys. I have to imagine like the
Oh,
information that you guys probably got in what is that, a 4-day, 5-day weekend was probably insane.
yeah. Oh my gosh. I was like so exhausted. I was sick for like 2 weeks after that. I feel like because it was like just crazy. And like trying to talk to everyone and go to every booth. And, but yeah, it was very convenient that everyone was, in one place at the same time. And I was like, amazing. Like we can go talk to everyone and get all that feedback in one place. it has been fun to like build these relationships over time though. And it was a lot of people too who I'd met, you know, online or on Instagram or you'd seen on YouTube or we'd been emailing or whatever. And like getting to have face to face interactions with people and actually meet them in real life and have more thoughtful conversations was really nice too. And just getting to build more of those relationships with people in the community. And um, that's been really fun. Everyone's been like great. Like I feel like there's so many cool people in like the comic and magazine collecting world.
Yeah, I had a little bit of, unfortunately, for whatever reason, the National and San Diego Comic Con were
I
the same
know.
week.
Worst
I had
timing
a little bit
ever.
of FOMO, but luckily you guys were kind enough to smuggle one to the National with Ryan to show off.
I know. One,
So you
that's the
were,
other people were like messaging me, being like, I'm at the National. And like, I was getting feedback from people at the National too, which was amazing. But yeah, I was happy we were able to send one over to the National and like they ended up putting it on display in the booth and stuff. So
well, I didn't realize that.
yeah, I think people were asking about it. Like they were like, wait, can we see the comic holder? And so eventually they put it on display. Because yeah, I think it was just people were so curious to see what it looked like and felt like. And um, I'm happy we were able to give people that opportunity before they like submit, you know, and just like it's a big risk. I get it. Like people are going to be probably testing us out for a while of like, okay, like what's this going to be like? You know, what's the product, the finished product going to look like? How is their grading scale going to be applied? Like, I know there's going to be a lot of questions. And so I think that's something we'll be doing more of is continuing to get, you know, samples out there, but then also getting a lot of like good blog posts and, you know, information out there about what to expect from us and kind of how we're going to do things. So, again, we're going to try to be super transparent and, yeah, make sure it's like a good lead up to when we actually do publicly launch.
It seems like most of the feedback, myself personally, and just kind of what I've heard and seen on social and even my own thoughts on it, it seems like most of the stuff seems to be label oriented and kind of size oriented because in its current prototype it is a little bit larger than a CGC slab. And I know I'm coming at this as someone that understands the card side of things. The label, I have a feeling, I mean, you guys are not, your labels, the PSA label is the PSA label. There's only so much you guys are probably going to be willing to bend on that.
Yeah.
But specifically on those two things, I think that's where, and correct me if I'm wrong if you've heard feedback otherwise, but those two seem to be the two hot button issues. Is that something that you guys are deep diving, like post San Diego and post this initial like coming out party of like, okay, is there some tweaks we can make to the label and kind of make things a little bit more clean, but still stick to the PSA brand, and then also like on the sizing stuff on the case itself?
Yeah, 100%. And literally was in meetings today about the label and the holder. So definitely very active progress that we're making on that. I think with the label, you kind of hit it. Yeah, exactly. Like we're not gonna all of a sudden be like, yeah, we're gonna do a purple label. Like we the red border is so iconic to the PSA brand, and red is kind of our brand color, and like that's who we are in our heritage, and like we're not gonna all of a sudden deviate from that. Um, and so I think if you're someone who's like very allergic to the color red, like that's too bad. Like, and it's maybe not the right grading company for you, but like there's also people who love the PSA red and like that's who we are in our brand, and that's how when you're looking at a card or eventually a comic, that it's PSA is that red border. And so I think that was something that we never really uh, kind of like were questioning, like that it's like our brand and we're going to stick with that. And it's gotten us to where we are today. And I think I love the label because I do think the simplicity actually lets the book shine more and it doesn't distract from it. And it's, yeah, I think I hear it though that there's things we could do better, like the legibility from afar. Like if it's, at a dealer table and it's on display, like people want to be able to see the title and the issue number and the grade. And so that's kind of where we're doing more like tinkering, I would say, with like font sizes and can this be bigger or can this be smaller? What's the key information? Like definitely we're using the feedback we got to like make some iterations there, but I don't think we're gonna throw away the red border, and that we're kind of sticking with. And then in terms of the holder and the size, like you're right that was a huge um, feedback item, which was really, really helpful, is that people were like, they'd pick it up and be like, oh my gosh, this thing is so heavy. But some people really liked that. Like a lot of customers were like, this feels premium, this feels really safe, like, this is shatterproof, like this will really protect my valuable book. And so a lot of like more individual customers like actually really liked that. But then I know there's other customers and like dealers, and maybe if you're dealing with large quantities, you're like, this is going to be such a headache to carry and ship, and it's just so heavy, doesn't fit in my standard sized boxes that I have with all my other graded comics, like. And I understand that too. So that's kind of where we came to this conclusion of, we don't want to totally throw away this kind of premium holder that we had on display at San Diego. We'll still offer that. Golden Age books, any kind of oversized comic books will fit in there. And we want to give people an option to have that holder if they want kind of something that's more durable and truly like focus on that protection and preservation element. Like we have that option, but then we are also developing a slightly smaller and lighter, kind of more industry standard sized holder as well. So we'll have that at launch too. So we'll have kind of the industry size smaller one. We'll have this more kind of premium, slightly larger one that we had at San Diego, and then we'll have our magazine holder. So, yeah, I think that'll be a good place to land. And like, I'm really grateful for all the feedback we got about that. Our kind of slightly larger holder, because it showed like, okay, we really do need to have that smaller, lighter one if we want to get kind of maybe more of these dealers or like bulk submitters on board.
Yeah, I know, like myself personally, I was like, when I initially held it, one, you are correct. The first thing I thought of was, this feels like an extremely premium product. Like you hold that thing and it feels not cheap at all. It does feel like if you took that thing, if someone broke into your house, you could legitimately probably use that to defend yourself. Like if someone was walking through a door and took a swing at them with it, like it felt
for sure.
like a tank.
Yeah.
But there's probably, case security is a hot button issue as well in the comic book community. And I know, PSA slabs just for cards are, one of the more secure ones out there. You guys have a lot of, public facing security features, and also a lot of kind of like, if security features in the case and label itself. I have to imagine case security was a major, I want to say innovation, but a major talking point when you guys were kind of designing this slab.
Exactly. And I think that was where it really came from. It wasn't like we were like, oh, we just want to make this really big, heavy case for no reason. Like we have again been like working with our engineering teams who are best in class, at holder development in other categories, and like trying to look at like, what are the pain points in the current market? What's PSA best in class in? Like we're known for, being the best against counterfeits, fraud, tampering. Like our holders are, truly secure. And so that was something that was really important. And also just like preserving your precious collectible. Like we wanted something where you can drop it and it doesn't shatter or move around. We wanted something that was UV protective. That was something I'd heard a lot. We wanted something that could withstand extreme temperatures. Like there were all of these criteria where we genuinely wanted to make a better case and a more protective case and a more secure case. And so that was like kind of the starting point and what we were building off of. And then people were frustrated about, okay, well, it's heavier and it's bigger. And it's like, well, that's because we're trying to make something that will preserve your item the best. But I think we found a good middle ground where we can slim it down and, make it a little bit lighter, but still have those amazing features. But we do really believe that our holders will be the best holders in the market.
You mentioned UV protection. Do you know, like, what is I forget how they rate UV protection, but do you know, like, is it like?
It's 99% UV reflective, I think is the terminology. And so we're using polycarbonate as like the material for our holders, which again is like really good against, shattering and impact. Like it won't shatter. We've done tons of tests and like have some crazy videos that maybe we'll be able to share at some point of us like chucking these things and making sure they really do hold up, which I think is amazing news for collectors. Like these are not brittle. Like these will definitely like stay intact. And then yeah, same with the polycarbonate is really good against extreme temperatures, which can be another issue over time. And then we're adding like kind of a special additive that allows for that UV reflectiveness on the holder as well, which I think is so important for comics and magazines. Like people want to display these, they want to have them out on their shelf, and like you don't want to be concerned about fading and color changes and things. So the materials and like the thought that went into the engineering are really why we got to the place where we're at, but we are making some tweaks to try to make sure it kind of stacks and fits well with existing slabs that are out there too. So I get it. I heard that feedback loud and clear.
It is, like I said, it is a bit, if you've not had a chance to hold one, it is a very premium feeling holder for sure. We touched on the label. Part of the thing in the comic book industry is, there are different color labels kind of depending on, various qualifications of the book. Like there's just the general basic label, and then there's purple labels and green labels and, all this and that. Do you guys know how you're going to handle that sort of stuff yet? Or is it going to be, are you actually going to have, the various grading companies now kind of do different color labels depending on, whether it's ultra restored or, that sort of stuff? Is that something you guys are going to follow suit with, or is that not locked in yet?
Right now our plan is really not to do like a ton of different color variation, like, and rather just call it out on the label itself. So, like if something was restored, that will be like clearly marked on the label in text, but wouldn't have a separate colored label. Same with like autograph. Like we aren't going to have, like we have our autograph business today in PSA, and you get like an autograph grade, or, just if you want it authenticated, like it's marked on the label and clearly called out, but it's not a different label altogether. And so I think that's the way we're thinking about it for comics too. It's interesting because I've heard from customers, like some people really don't like the colored labels, and want consistency. Yeah, and so you obviously want to be very clear, and you don't want to be like hiding information either. So like calling out if it's restored, obviously, or has a autograph on it, like we want to make sure that information is there. You're not hiding anything or deceiving customers, but the separate colors too is like, that's just one way to do it. Like we can also just call it out in other ways. So that's more the route we're exploring. So yeah, with all these decisions, I've learned not everyone's going to be happy. And I think you just have to do what's best for, yeah, the business and for the customers, and like trying to balance that all, it can be challenging. So I'm sure too, like if you look at the labels from other grading companies, like they've changed so much over the years, and like they have, like looking at the earliest ones to where they are now, like they've had that kind of luxury of time to like iterate and make different versions. And so I don't know if it's like something that we're just going to release and be like, this is the final label, like we're never changing it, like I'm sure we'll continue to innovate and iterate. And this is just kind of our hope is to put our best foot forward, when we launch, and still kind of working through those details.
I mean, even the PSA card label has changed quite a few iterations over decades. So
we're always looking at it, and we have an amazing design team who puts so much thought into all this stuff. And so definitely too, we want to do things that are like in line with, if the card labels are changing, then it's like, okay, what does that mean for the comic labels, and that uniformity, and kind of, if there's new anti-counterfeit features or new security features, like making sure we're getting the best technology, all that kind of stuff will be part of it too.
A couple last things that I want to hit on really quickly. The other advantage that you guys have starting from scratch is census or pop report, on the card side of things, but census on the comic book side of things basically means the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
You guys get to start that from scratch. And I believe you said publicly that you're not launching with one initially, but there will obviously be one at some point in time. Are you guys, one of the frustration points now is like things that have developed over time have not been tracked a lot currently, like newsstands, for example, are a real big one. Like that is not something that's tracked on most grading companies' census, because it was kind of something that came about, once the census was already established. You guys kind of have a luxury to kind of start with oh, okay, here's your normal book. Here's the newsstands. Here's Mark Jewelers. Whatever else kind of paths you want to go down. Is that stuff that you guys are looking at in regards to when you kind of lay this thing out and present it to the world for the census?
Yes, for sure. I think that's been like there's a couple areas I would say of like building this business from scratch that have been like the biggest undertakings. Like holders is definitely one, and like kind of holders and labels. One is just like all of our kind of technology and systems, like our grading system and the submission form, online, and all the technology that has to get built. And then I would say like our spec database and how we're going to collect data, how we're going to standardize data, normalize data, like what data points are important, like what's abbreviated, what's not abbreviated, like all of that is so key for having like a really accurate census, for having really accurate pop reports, for having really accurate, eventually hopefully set registry, like having cool technology that we can build, like with our cards, we're having scanning technology where you can take a picture and it can recognize that card. Like having really good quality data is the backbone of so much of like the experience that we're building. And so you're right that we have the luxury of like collecting as much and as comprehensive of data about every book we see from the get-go, including, yeah, is it a newsstand or like, looking at variant information, making sure we're doing it in a consistent way so that we can really have the best database, and use that to drive really good customer experiences.
Now, are you guys planning on like on cards? Like if I send a card into you guys, you do the pre-image scan prior to it hitting the grading room. Is that something that you guys will be porting over to the comic book side too? Like I know you guys love your imaging and your various stages, and so you can have that. I myself have had to use those reference images before. I got a grade back and I was like, "What, really this?" And then they pulled up the reference image and I looked at it. The first time I didn't see it, and the second time I was like, "Oh yeah, actually that card was screwed up when I sent it into you. Like that's my bad, not your guys' bad."
Yes,
Are those things that you're gonna, I don't want to say steal from the card side, but be like, that works really good over there, we're gonna use that over here?
definitely. Yes, we're planning to do that. So everything will be imaged, right when it comes in the door. And then we'll also do kind of the final view image. So what it looked like when it was holdered and left us. So just if there are any concerns or questions, like we have that kind of paper trail. So yes, we'll pretty much like all of our operations, the way we're doing things, we're going to be leveraging the decades of experience and learnings we've had from our other categories. So yes, imaging will be something that's super important, and just the way we do our whole operation is going to be again at like super high standards, and not cutting corners, not overlooking things. Like we're going to treat every item, like it's the most special thing ever, as we do with all of our other items across the PSA portfolio.
And then kind of spinning this thing forward a little bit, recently on the card side of things, you guys had a lot of integrations kind of and really kind of still coming online with like eBay integration, PSA vault, like direct to auction after grading. To spin this forward, you guys are post launch and everything's up and running. Can we kind of expect to see similar things like that at some point in time in the future where I could send a comic book in, get it graded, and rather than have it shipped back if I so choose, just immediately send that thing to an eBay auction or to the PSA vault and kind of manipulate it from there?
Yes, definitely. That's something we want to do, and we're kind of actively working on because yeah, that'll be a huge advantage, I think, to using our service too. We want to make it as simple and easy for collectors to not only get their items graded, but also to find liquidity if that's what they're looking for, or to, yeah, store in our vault if they just want to keep it safe there and decide what to do later with it. So yeah, that's the hope, is to offer all those services to the comic and magazine collectors too.
I think that'll be interesting to kind of follow how that goes and the adoption rate on that and kind of how all that plays out because that's a big change for comic collectors. Like on card side, we're not everyone uses vaults, but we're much more accustomed to the idea of vaulting a card and then kind of manipulating it from afar of like, do I want to have it sent home? Do I want to store it? Do I want to sell it? Do I want to just let it marinate there for a little bit and then maybe send it to market or whatever? Whereas on the comic side, I feel like people do vault comics. It's not unheard of, but it doesn't seem like it's as prevalent as we're used to on the card side of the world.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that's where I'm excited too, is I feel like PSA can bring a lot of like kind of innovation and like the cool things we are seeing in cards and other categories to comics and magazines, like it's like why isn't that more adopted in those communities? Like I think maybe it's just because they haven't had a great option to do so yet. And so I think we'll see more innovation there with us kind of pushing it there and like trying to do some cool new things and add more options to, grade and sell and just make it seamless and easy. Like I hope people will be excited about that and give it a try in the comic and magazine space.
So last one here, and we won't hold you to anything firm, but so roughly speaking,
I'm not going to give you a date.
I know you're not going to give me a date, but like 2025 is fairly vague. Is that like first half of 2025, second half of 2025?
Yes.
Okay.
I think I can safely say first half of 2025.
Okay. We at least got that out of you.
Yes.
Get you in too much trouble.
I don't want to give a specific date because
I wouldn't expect you to this early, but I was at least curious on 2025's been out there, but how broad is that? I don't want Nat knocking on your door tomorrow morning being like, what did you say?
Yeah, we're working as quickly and diligently as we can and like want to do it as quickly as possible, but like I said too, I want to do it right, and so that's why I'm like reserving some of that wiggle room to make sure, and things never go according to plan, you know what I mean? Like
there's three things that are going to go wrong that you haven't even thought of yet.
Exactly. Oh yes, we're learning and new things pop up every day, so it's exciting though. It's like so fun to just like be building new businesses for PSA, and I feel super grateful that I get this experience and get to bring this to the comic and magazine community. And next year is going to be super, super exciting, and it's going to be really fun.
It's got to be fun for you guys too, as on cards you just look at the data, you guys are the market leader, and now your guys are kind of coming in the opposite as like, I don't want to say like PSA/Collectors Universe is the underdog, but in comic books you definitely are. It's kind of a role reversal for you guys. Like you guys really haven't been in this position for a while.
It is different, and like we're not expecting we're gonna come in and be number one day one. Like I don't think that's realistic, but I think I do think that it's something over time where we can hopefully build like a really good customer base and show that we're trying to really do things the right way and the PSA way, and hopefully the community likes that and adopts it and is excited, and we can also bring net new customers into the hobby, which I think there's so much potential for that. So I'm really excited about that opportunity too.
Well, it'll be an interesting next few months as you guys kind of lead up, and I'm sure you'll have more things to tease as we get closer and closer to the date. But thank you so much for the time, Elizabeth.
And we'll talk again, and I'll have more updates for you as we progress. And as always, like I love feedback and love talking to people like you, and so it makes my job fun. I love this part.
Yeah, thank you so much for the time. Thanks for carving out some time for me to join us and kind of talk about this stuff and kind of talk at kind of a macro level of a little sneak peek behind the scenes of kind of how all this stuff works. So
yeah, thank you.
All right, Elizabeth, where would be the best place if people want to follow along? Does PSA Comics have their own? Is that an Instagram handle that someone's going to go steal now because I mentioned it? Is there?
Not. Yeah, we don't actually have like our own handles for each category. So yeah, just like the standard PSA card handle. We do have a PSA TCG handle if you want to follow that too. It's not exactly TCG, but we'll probably be like cross posting things there as well. But yeah, kind of our standard PSA social channels. Also our website, we do have like a blog post up that we did when we announced that kind of has some of our early information about the service we're offering, and we'll continue to launch more stuff on our website. We're planning to do kind of like a comic grading 101, magazine grading 101, pressing 101, like put a lot of content out ahead of launch to get people kind of prepared to like, okay, how do I submit? Like for a lot of our customers, like this will be a brand new category for them. And so we have a lot of education to do. So definitely, across our social handles. Also, we'll be sending emails too. So, sign up for emails. We'll probably be talking about it in our magazine. Anywhere you hear news from PSA, we'll be talking about comics and magazines.
Awesome. Thanks again, Elizabeth.
Yeah, thank you.